Well, I want to introduce myself again. I'm Maeve Larson. I'm one of the interns Luke has this year with ALP. And just to start, we have about 6 questions we'd like to ask you two about your book. And it'll be pretty casual. And if there's anything you want to edit out in the future, we can do, or before we publish this interview, we can do some tweaks and stuff. So, no stress. It's a light interview. But just to start, I would like to say thank you both for joining us today. And thank you for being our first interviewees. And if you don't mind beginning, if you both could introduce yourselves, tell us your name, your program affiliation, and a little bit about your research interests within applied linguistics. And we can start with you, Matt, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, sure. Thanks for having us today. My name is Matt Kessler. I'm an associate professor of applied linguistics at the University of South Florida. I do research primarily involving call or computer assisted language learning and second language writing as well, and oftentimes where they intersect.
Yeah, and I'm Elliott Casal, published under J. Elliott Casal. I realized when I was a small child that if I got a PhD, I'd be Dr. J. I'm a very short man, so that was a lifelong dream. So Dr. J. Elliott Casal. I'm at the University of Memphis in the English department in the applied linguistics concentration. My research focuses on second language and multilingual writing, corpus linguistics, and writing pedagogy. I also do these days a lot more work with language technologies.
Awesome. All right. And jumping into our first question, and this is for both of you, so whoever would like to answer first. We're just curious, what was the motivation for writing the book, making the most of graduate school? And was there a particular moment in your own careers as students or faculty members when you realized a resource like this was needed?
Wow, that's a good question. Can we remember when we thought of
Yeah.
this idea, Elliot?
It's interesting because the exact moment I don't know, but it emerged out of ongoing conversations that Matt and I had that really started with reflecting on how fortunate we were to have great mentors just throughout our academic careers, even as undergraduate students. We went to the same undergraduate program, didn't know each other then, but also went to the same master's program and met each other then. And you know, I think Matt, maybe the seeds of this was great mentorship we had there, and then great mentorship during our PhD programs, and just reflecting on that and how that's not available for everybody. And even if it is, some people aren't good at taking advantage of that mentorship or building those relationships. So I started, Matt, and I'll pass it to you to give an answer of a little bit more substance.
Yeah, I would say also building on that. I mean, there were a lot of things I think as we progressed throughout our MA programs and PhD programs especially, there were a lot of things that we just wish we had known socially, right? Less research oriented, but more socially in terms of how to be a good grad student and, what your advisor's expectations are, and some of the challenges that a lot of students face. And so we kind of talked about we had wished that if there was just some resource available where we had known, for instance, hey, everyone experiences imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
You're going to experience it. It's okay to talk about it. It would have made, I think, life a lot easier, right? And so even though we received such great mentorship from all these different professors and older students, we also felt that there were some other social issues that maybe we could address through a book or some other way.
And then I guess just building on that, our first conversation where we talked about the book, I do remember Matt and I also saying, in spite of the difficulties that everybody experiences. We had a lot of fun during our graduate work. And part of that is that for whatever reason, we were able to find not just the mentors I mentioned earlier, but friends, colleagues, and we were able to find out a lot of that those that information that Matt brought up, like the imposter syndrome thing. That's something a lot of people suffer personally and internally, and we did, but we talked to each other and other people about that and came to the discovery that that was something that we shared with other people. Anyway, so really just grew out of our experiences, I think is a summary.
Nice. Thank you. And like you were mentioning, in this book, you guys cover a range of topics, such as, like you mentioned, imposter syndrome to like research and networking. While you were working on this book together, how did you decide which topics to cover and include in the book?
This is also a good question. I don't remember. It was a couple years. We started with I think brainstorming a lot of the challenges that we faced personally, right? So imposter syndrome, right? We looked at it sort of linearly in the sense of when we started grad school, what were some of the challenges we faced as we moved through it? What were experiences that we encountered?
Mhm.
And so I think that was sort of the origins of that. I don't know if you remember any particular other topics and how they came up, Elliot.
Well, we talked to a lot of our peers and friends about their experiences as well. And we were both at the time, because we focus on academic writing and have worked with a lot of graduate students, we also found ourselves during our PhDs and before in positions where we were working with graduate students across the disciplines, maybe more than your typical PhD student would. I had been teaching doctoral writing for 6 years when I finished my PhD. So we did have a little bit of a sense of the struggles that graduate students share because in that role you can imagine a lot of people, for example, would come to me and talk about the difficulties they were having since I wasn't a professor at the time. So yeah, I think some of it was our own experiences, some of it was talking to other people. I remember you, Matt, did this, and I did it for sure. Talked to some of my PhD students about what were some things that you'd like to know a little bit more about. If the way I phrased it was, let's pretend there was a free book to guide you through the first year. What kinds of things would you like to find in it? And not everything made it in. Um, but I think particularly there's a chapter on crises that you
Mhm.
experience. Some people mention like things come up and we don't have any idea of how to approach that stuff other than going to our advisors. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, that's right. I recall that now. We sort of gave people a sample outline, a lot of grad students, and
Yeah.
sought their feedback. So now that you mentioned that, I recall there were a handful of people who reached out and suggested topics that we might actually include.
And that's kind of how the student story thing got started too, is that
Mhm.
it was an idea we had, but then we also started hearing really interesting anecdotes from students.
Awesome. Yeah, that was going to be my next question was asking about how you decided to implement it, but I think that is really cool that you were really involved with the grad students and wanted their personal feedback, and that's how you got the anecdotes, because I think that's a great touch to the book.
Well, and we
Um,
don't want to pretend like our experiences reflect everybody's experiences.
yeah, that's it. I like it a lot. What was it like deciding how to implement those anecdotes into the book and deciding like where to place them and if there were too many or too little in there?
Yeah, so that was also, we solicited those personally. So we sent out, I mean, we met a lot of grad students over the years, of course, from being graduate students and then from being professors as well. So we had, I think, originally maybe about 15 people in mind that we thought they would write a great story. We don't know what their personal experience is, but we gave them the full list of topics of, each chapter has subtopics within them. Do you feel comfortable writing a personal narrative on maybe one or two? And if so, would you rank which ones you'd like to talk about? So we kind of left it up to students to figure out which topics spoke to them rather than us saying, "Hey, you seem like you'd be good to write about imposter syndrome or something
Right.
like that," which
You
which
seem
might
like an
not be
imposter.
which might not be the best approach for that. So I think in the end it worked out pretty well because people could really speak to something that they had experienced and that was personal to them.
Yeah, I think the tough part about that was deciding which ones we could fit and which ones we couldn't. We ended up including a few more than we thought we would, just because so many of them were great. I mean, I don't want to say like that any of them were bad, but there were so many that were just, when I say strong, so many that just spoke to you as a person who had been through graduate school, where you could really see a student struggling or growing or reflecting in this really particular and personal way. And we thought, oh, we've got to put that in. Someone's going to connect with that. And so in the end, I think we expanded it beyond what we had originally thought we would include. But it was really easy to get them, and they were really great.
That's nice. Yeah, I read one. I can't remember her name, but it was a. I'm just gonna bring out one of my favorite ones that I read when I was like cruising through the book. It was this graduate student, and she's Chinese and talking about her imposter syndrome because she got an A when her other peers that may have been American, they didn't score as highly, and so she was talking to her professor, being like, "Oh, is this grade really like? Did I deserve this?" And her professor was like, "Yes, you deserved it. Like you did great. That's why you get it." And I'm like, it's a really nice anecdote. I really liked that one a lot. All right, kind of pivoting from the personal anecdotes now with the included in the story, but I'm curious to know what was it like working on this book together, and did your perspectives differ in any ways that you believe enriched the book?
I want to start by saying I always love working with Matt. We've worked together a lot. I hope we continue working together a lot. So it wasn't difficult to work with Matt on this. It never is. Now I'll pass it back to you, Matt.
Well, now that you've read that statement, I prepared
Yeah.
for you and
Thank you.
was guessing we were going to get this question.
It's so natural.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think Elliot and I have worked a lot together. We know each other pretty well, so it's pretty easy. I would say whenever we work together, there's no ego. Like best idea always wins. We don't care. We just want to make the best thing that we can. Um, so it was a breeze to write. It was,
Yeah.
it was fun, right? We got to learn a lot about other graduate students and their experiences, things we had maybe never even considered in the process. So I think it helped us, probably be better advisors in the process as well,
For sure.
and sort of understanding this diversity of perspectives. But yeah, it's easy working with
And
Elliot.
to jump back in, we weren't making an academic argument. We also weren't giving advice. If you've read it, we were raising important questions. We were kind of raising awareness of struggles that people have. And so it wasn't like, I would tell a story about my personal experience and Matt would say, no. It would always enrich it when our experiences were different. And it also enriched it when our experiences aligned and we would say, oh, I didn't know you had that experience too. So I think part of it was everything Matt said applies, but also the nature of the book is that we were trying to help students think about their experiences as graduate students in new ways, recognize the resources that might be around them, and also, kind of raise questions that they might not think to ask themselves until later on in their career, early on, rather than, give advice, push them in directions, tell them what to do. So there wasn't really that much discussion of like this idea is better than that. I think the only time that may have come up is at the end of the chapters we had 5 tips or something like that, and
Right.
sometimes we had 6 or 7 tips and had to figure out which ones were cut, but that was easy.
I like what you're doing in that way of framing it. Like it's kind of you're providing readers with and graduate students with a kind of a framework rather than saying do this, not that. You're saying here are some considerations, some ways to reflect, to be more effective, to be more productive, to be more successful as graduate students in that particular space, addressing all the challenges, recognizing
Yeah.
and addressing those challenges, rather than kind of sweeping them under the rug or pretending they don't exist or saying figure it out on your own. Yeah, I think that's a huge benefit.
And then, I guess to follow up, we've heard that a lot of advisors use our book as a way of framing conversations, and we love that. Maybe if we had directed it more as advice, that'd be a little bit harder to use in that way. And so I think it works the way we framed it. But anyway, I wrote it, so of course I like it. I like that.
We all do.
That's awesome to hear that it was such easy collaboration between you two and that it seemed to flow so well. I feel like that's not something that is typical with a lot of co-authors, or not that I've heard of, but yeah, I think that's really great that it works so well for you too. So my next question is, well, to kind of introduce it, I know that you two had this idea for the book kind of around the same time that Luke was, working on creating ALP, the Applied Linguistics Press. It may not have been established yet, but you guys pitched the idea to him. So I'm curious, what made you two decide to publish Making the Most of Graduate School with Applied Linguistics Press?
Yeah, so this is very serendipitous, I would say,
Yeah.
Luke. Right, you had this idea of something you had been wanting to do for a while. And we had this idea for a book we'd been wanting to do for a while. And we had been shopping it around to these different publishers. And every publisher we went to, they all said the same thing, which was, we really like this idea. We think it's great, but it doesn't fit within any of our series and
Yeah.
the things that we do. And so we agree it's a great idea. We think it'll sell a lot, but we don't know where to put it and how to market it. Um, so I think, right, we had talked to Luke about this, and I don't know how it came up, but you had just mentioned offhand that, hey, I've been thinking of starting this initiative for some time, and I think that really kickstarted the conversations of maybe this is the first thing we do, and after all, this book is meant to sort of give helpful tips and have you think about important questions that you might ask during your graduate studies.
Yeah.
So if it were free rather than, $50 with a publisher or something like that, we have the opportunity to reach more people and actually, maybe help people.
And I'll say, just adding on to that, like how that conversation with you, Luke, came about. Matt, I remember a chat with you. So there are lots of books available for graduate students at later stages. And if I remember correctly, Luke, you put one of those together. And I remember Matt saying that he was going to ask you what you thought about this idea. That may have been
Oh,
after
that's
you had
right. That's right.
chatted about something, but it was soliciting a little bit of advice as somebody who's written a successful book on on making the most of graduate school, but what they thought about the idea. I may be clouding things or flipping the order, but I kind of remember that too, that we did seek advice as well. For me, when I heard about the idea of ALP, I loved it, and I especially loved it for this book. And this is something that I've said a bunch. If Matt and I knew from the beginning, and we said many times, if we were going to write a book like this, we weren't going to charge $50. We were going to want it to be one of the cheaper ones, and it doesn't get cheaper than $0 and no cents. And so we were very excited about the idea of putting this book in the hands of graduate students rather than asking. Graduate students aren't paid a tremendous amount of money at most schools. We didn't really want to be taking their money to give them advice that they may or may not find to be valuable in their own lives or not. So it fit really well with the mission.
I totally agree, and I respect that so much of you guys that you had the bravery to bring this to ALP, and dare I say, ALP is still a pretty modest operation, but I don't know if I mean this was what really pushed the boats from the shore on ALP. It was let's have this be the first book, and I don't know if I would have that impetus that like push that drive from the inside, the fireman had been lit underneath me to just officially launch it unless this book had come along, which you guys were, like Matt said, you guys were kind of shopping around a little bit and it wasn't really finding a home. And I was like, if you guys are open to it, this is my memory of the story of how it happened was I was just thinking, let's just make it happen. Let's just make this the first
Yeah.
ALP book. And I love it as the first ALP book. It's because it's targeted to graduate students and it's sort of a service oriented book. It's something that's relevant for anybody and everybody, whether you're a mentor or a mentee or a future mentee, or you're trying to just be a reflective scholar. So I'm so glad about how it worked out with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Me too.
I think
Thanks for believing in us. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
well, yeah, thanks for believing in the press.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, Luke told me previously, and so I wanted to mention it here too, in case you two didn't know, but Making the Most of Graduate School is actually the most downloaded book from the ALP website as well, too. So it has the most responses.
Oh, wow.
Well, it's the first.
It's the
But still,
first, yeah.
by far, yeah, it is really, really widely downloaded. Yeah, so it's reaching that audience that you intended to reach.
That's great.
That is fantastic. And I'll say, and I know it's true for you too, Matt, I have received a lot of goodwill from students and positive feedback and people just saying, thanks, it was good. So many people have used a phrase that says something like, it felt like you were writing it for me, which was the ultimate compliment as far as I was concerned, because we wanted it to be inclusive of everybody's experiences. Yeah.
That is awesome. I know you kind of mentioned previously too that you've had advisors who use your book kind of as a framework as well. And you just mentioned that you get a lot of positive feedback. But um, yeah, I guess Matt too, I was wondering what kind of reactions or responses have you had? And Elliot, if there's any more that you want to tell or like a personal experience of a student reaching out or a professor.
Yeah, I mean, I think Elliot and I each occasionally at a conference, someone will stop us, a graduate student, and say something to us about a particular chapter they liked or that they just enjoyed it in general. We also each occasionally receive emails, like a couple times per semester, from students who have read it, who are using it. Um, and so I mean, it's really nice, right?
Yeah.
I've written other things and I don't really receive those about other things I've written. So, I don't know what that says, but maybe it says nothing. But I think it also maybe speaks to the nature of the book and the audience and the purpose, which is, again, is very different from things we normally do in academia and applied linguistics.
I've received a lot of the things like I said before. I think the first one, a really clear story. Matt, I think you'll remember this. When we were close to finishing a first draft or something, we had one chapter we felt really good about, and in a conversation with one of my PhD students at my program, they had said, "Oh, I'd really like to read something about that." And Matt and I sent it to them as a sample, and they were like, "This is exactly what I needed to read on this chapter." And we were still at that stage where we were like, "Are we even doing a good job at this? Like, we believe in our vision." Nobody had read anything other than our intro yet. And, it's not an academic tone, but it's also not a conversational tone. We're thinking, what are we doing? And the first feedback from the student was really strong. So we thought, okay, maybe we're on the right page. I have received some suggestions for topics that they'd like to include, and I always make the joke. The best part about open access is that it's not, in this case, is that it's not that expensive to make a second edition if we ever want to. Um, but it's just been positive. It's been good. There have been some people who ask me, and Matt, maybe you too, why we didn't try to make money off of it. And I say, well, that wasn't really the goal, but
I've had a few people ask me that. They were,
yeah.
current grad students are like, I like it, but why? Why didn't you try to publish it? Why didn't you try to make money? And so, right, Luke, when we explain the publishing model of to them, I think it makes a little more, they're surprised, but I think it makes a little more sense too in terms of the goal and how the goal of the book matches so well with the press.
We didn't do it for the money, and we don't
Yeah.
regret doing it this way at all. It's just a thing that comes up, but we feel like we made the right choice for sure.
I'm so glad you did.
Amazing. Those were all of our questions that we had for you two today. If there's anything else that you guys would like to add, you can now. Or thank you so much to both of you for your time. We really appreciate getting to ask you questions and hearing your answers on the book.
Thanks for having
Yeah,
us.
thank you.
Thanks
It's
so
been
much,
so
guys.
great to work with ALP to this day.